Hey plant people, welcome. Thank you so much for joining me. Hope everybody is having a great start of their autumn and their spooky season, whatever you celebrate. Today we are going to be talking about some plants that will work really well if you are trying to work with a small space. So maybe you just don't have a lot of room for plants, or maybe you do have the room and you don't necessarily want to dedicate a huge space for plants. You just want to have a little bit of greenery. These are gonna be some great options for you that aren't too crazy, don't take up too much space, and still look really nice. Okay, so the first one that we're going to talk about is Hoyas. Hoyas are such a great option for smaller spaces because you can grow them in many different ways. So you can put them in hanging planters, which we'll talk a little bit more about hanging planters later. I am going to throw in a few tips on some space management options if you are trying to conserve space. But they look really great in hanging planters. They look really great just like sitting on a shelf and trailing down. They look really great if you want to grow them wrapped around a trellis. And for me, Hoyas are just very easy to manage because they don't grow super crazy fast. And even if they do, there are so many species that have smaller leaves or leaves that just kind of like fit more compactly into like a small space or something like that. Also, they come in a bajillion different forms and patterns and variegations, and there's silver ones, there's splashy ones. I'm going to talk about a couple of different ones today, just so you can see a few of the different options that are out there. So the first one I'm going to talk about is my Hoya Erythrina Nara. I will, if you have not watched any of my videos previously, I do struggle on name pronunciations because these scientific names are difficult, okay? So I'm working with what I got and I'm doing my best, okay? But I believe this is the Erythrina Nara, and I will put names on the screen as always. This is just a good example of a good, solid green Hoya. So she does have like a little bit of splash on her, but she is very, very minimally like flashy. She's just kind of like a basic green. She does have some really cool veining, which is something that's really nice if you want something that's not super duper busy and has a lot of variegation or a lot of splash. There are a lot of Hoya that still have really beautiful veining. So it gives you some different options. Sorry, my dog is being a crybaby. I will BRB. So funny, if you are not aware, I have a large greyhound, and I had always thought like that they would not necessarily be super vocal, but they are so vocal. It's like having, or mine is at least, like he's like a husky. He will just like scream his head off at everything. So like I was saying, if you want something that's a little bit of greenery, it's not very busy. This one has not been the fastest grower, although I am trying to get on top of my watering habits with these guys because I recently got one of those like electric sprayer watering can things, and it makes my life like a bazillion times easier because I can really easily get into my Hoya cabinet. But this is a great option. Basic, nothing crazy going on, still has really beautiful veining and beautiful dark green foliage. This one I have trellis, so this is one way that you can grow them, and you can just wrap, like they'll shoot out these tendrils and you can just wrap the tendrils around the trellis, and eventually they'll put leaves out along this little like tendril thing. But essentially you can just continue to wrap this tendril around and around and around the trellis. So it doesn't really take up a ton of space. It would stay kind of compact in this trellis. Now do keep in mind, always obviously research the types of plants before you bring them into your home, because there are a lot that when they mature, they get quite large. And if you're not looking for something that's super duper large, just kind of keep that in mind to do a little check before you bring it home. But assuming the leaves aren't super gigantic, you would still have a fairly compact plant that is just on this trellis. You will also see a lot of options for silver Hoya. This is my Carnosa Nova Ghost. And this is like a very gray, shiny, silvery option. This has, again, a really nice, more compact leaf size. So they are not incredibly large leaves. Like you can definitely still easily manage these, but they're super beautiful. And it's really nice just to have some different options, like depending on what kind of look you want to go for, or your like designed kind of wants in your space. Like maybe you don't want a plant that's like super green or super variegated, but there is something that's kind of like gray and like this kind of like neutral, minimal kind of coloration. So she is gorgeous. This one has been super easygoing too, like probably one of my most easygoing Hoyas. Carnosa tend to be easygoing anyways if you're not into Hoyas yet. Carnosa are always like really good options. The next one I have is Verticilliata. Is that how you say it? Verticilliata Quang Nagai. And this is a cool variegated species. I do like the leaf shape, and a lot of Hoyas have like quite firm leaves, and this one is one that has like very, very firm, rigid leaves. So they are, it's kind of interesting, you know, to have like a plant that is so like firm. It doesn't feel like a plant leaf. It feels like, I don't know, like plastic or something almost. But this is really cool if you wanted something that did have a little bit more personality, like a little bit more visually stimulating than just like plain gray or plain green or something like this. And of course there are a bazillion, like I said, a bazillion different species of Hoyas that come in every version, color pattern you could possibly want. So this is just like an example of a good like variegated one that I have. I honestly don't have like a ton of variegated Hoya in my collection. They're mostly splashy and silver. But I really love this one. It has some like cool variation in these leaves. Like the older leaves are more of this light yellow color, and the newer leaves are more, which it looks pretty yellow on camera, but in real life it looks like kind of like Aurea type, kind of like a greenish color on these newest leaves. And its leaves have been getting pretty big. Like the leaves that it came with were all this size, and then it just put out that leaf. So that one's big, and then these top ones are getting bigger too. But it's just so beautiful, and I love how it has like, I love Hoya that have the different like layers of variegation, where you can see it has like the yellow, and then it has a little bit of mint, and then some dark green, a couple different colors of green in some of these leaves. You can see it kind of well on this one towards the tip. But yeah, but that's so pretty. Like if you wanted something that brought some focus, like a focal plant, something like this that has really nice variegation would work for you. But again, I've got this one trellis. So see, I'm just gonna continue to wrap as this vine gets bigger around the trellis over and over. And even though these leaves are fairly large, like you can see, even if those leaves were going all the way around, like it would not be too crazy. It wouldn't be like a philodendron or a monstera, or like this, for example. Like this would not be a good option for you. Okay, and the last kind that I'm gonna talk about is a splashy one. This is a Pachylauda, no, I'm sorry. This is a Pachylauda Icensis splash. And this one is one of my super duper splashy Hoyas. So this one has larger, rounded, kind of more matte leaves. And it has this like really dark green foliage with a minty, like a heavy minty splash on top. These are its two newest leaves that it gave me. And they are just so beautiful. Again, this kind of like brings some interest, but not quite, it's not quite as busy as the variegated one. But you can see, even if I had several of these on a shelf, like this is not going to take up a ridiculous amount of space. Like I could probably have 4 or 6 of these in place of like a reasonably sized philodendron or monstera or something, just because their leaves do tend to size up fairly quickly. But yeah, she is so pretty. So there are a lot of different types of Hoyas that have this kind of like splashy coloration. If you're a splash person. A lot of people are like silver or splash, like they really prefer the silver, they prefer the splash. But honestly, I like both of them. But this one is one of my favorites just because, I mean, it's gorgeous. That minty, the minty splash on those dark green leaves, get out of here. Okay, so the next one that we're gonna talk about is Scindapsus. And can you guess which plant I'm about to show you? Nobody knows, it's a mystery. No, it's not. It's my variegated Aurea Jade Satin Scindapsus that I talk about in every single video. If you've seen any of my previous videos for the last like 2 months, you would have seen this plant because I cannot stop talking about it. This is literally, I think this may be my favorite plant. If not my favorite plant, one of my very, very top favorite plants. And it's crazy because I strongly disliked Scindapsus before the Scindapsus, and now I'm kind of Scindapsus crazy right now. But I had a trailing Scindapsus a million years ago when I first started collecting plants, and it's the one that you find everywhere, like Lowe's and Home Depot and stuff, that's like light green with speckles. I think it's like, I can't remember. I will put like a photo or the name on the screen. I'm sure you've probably seen it at some point if you've ever gone plant shopping anywhere. Like everywhere always has that plant. But I got this one, and when I got it, it had 4 leaves. And this has been probably 4 months, maybe. And it's grown all of this. That's bonkers. Like, when I got it, it literally had these leaves, and it grew all of these leaves when I put it on this moss pole. And look at these. I am obsessed with this plant. I know I like talk about it like I'm just like surprised by how beautiful it is every single time, but I am. I just can't get over it. And the growth pattern, phenomenal. Absolutely phenomenal. Look at this. How beautiful and compact. This is my type A personality. And my like perfectionism loves this so much. It like makes my brain so happy. This like beautiful, symmetrical, flat, gorgeous growth pattern. Like, oh my gosh, look at that. And look at how compact that is. That's nuts. So obviously it's on a moss pole, and moss poles take up space vertically. Okay. I find that when I'm trying to fit plants into areas, like normally the vertical is not the issue, it's the horizontal, which is why it's so difficult for like crawling type plants. Like I have a Philodendron Summer Glory that is just out of control, and she's in one of those rectangular planters because she's a crawler, and she just like, literally cannot fill that plant. I can't fit that plant anywhere because not only is it in that long planter, but it has these like giant leaves that are just shooting out all over the place. So she's upstairs right now because I can't figure out where to put her. But the vertical is not the issue, you know, because you can stick this up against a wall and it is not taking up that much space. You see, it's not even barely sticking out of this pole. Like that's maybe 5 inches out from the wall. And the pot's not that big. And she is just happy as can be growing along here. Moss poles are a little bit of maintenance. Just keep that in mind. Like you do want to kind of keep on track of things and keep them moist. A lot of people, myself included, use the method where you put a plastic cup that has like a couple of holes poked in it in the top, and you can fill that cup up with water, and it'll kind of like wick through the moss really slowly so it doesn't like flood everywhere. So that's a really good option. But this is fantastic if you do not have a lot of space, and there are so many types of Scindapsus out there. Like if you don't like, again, the busy variegation, you could do a solid green. They have some that are like so dark green they're almost black. They have some that are totally silver, like I have right here. These are the ones that I got, that I did recently in the Green Escape unboxing. And this is the Silver Lady and the, what was this one? I think this is Silver Hero. And I just potted those up together, honestly, because I'm just trying to conserve space right now. And I think I'm gonna grow this as a trailing one. So I was like, these two kind of complement each other. Oh my gosh, Vash is crying again. Anyway, so these are the ones that I got in my Green Escape unboxing from Etsy. And I thought these complemented each other really well. The plain kind of like solid silver with the silver splash. And you can kind of see like if you wanted something that was, this is still like a little baby plant, so just keep that in mind. But if you wanted something that was like predominantly silver, or if you wanted something that had like a lot of silver, but just like a little bit of something like a little extra, a little bit of spice, the Silver Lady is a great option. So Silver Hero, Silver Lady, and those are a couple of different species of Scindapsus. And then this one, this is a Scindapsus Halomoon. This is more of kind of like a minty, marbly species of Scindapsus. I do also like how the leaf shape can come off this kind of like more angular, like a little bit more sharp there on the edge. But again, wow, stunning, amazing, 10 out of 10. And when they start growing up the pole again, like that just takes up almost no space at all. And this is just such a pleasure to grow. Like if you had this, like just watching this grow every single day, like the variegation on there, that is gorgeous. gorgeous, so fulfilling. Okay, y'all, we're gonna take a second and we are going to talk about philodendron. Now, philodendron can get huge. You may be like, what are you talking about? Like, you're crazy. Philodendron are some of the biggest plants that I own. And while that is correct, I do have some philodendron, like my, what was it, Weeks Red, which is absolutely massive. However, there are some philodendron, specifically self-heading philodendron, that you can kind of manipulate into being more compact that would work in a smaller space. Also, there are a lot of philodendron, like Florida Ghost, Florida Beauty, etc. that are kind of these climbing type philodendron that you can grow, kind of like how I have my Scindapsus on a moss pole. But I have one, my Florida Green, that's growing up my wall. I have those little like plastic hooks that are holding it up against my wall. And it honestly does not take up that much space because it's growing vertically along the wall, kind of like, again, it going vertical is not really the issue. It's more of a horizontal that it becomes the issue, or like how broad the wingspan is. But this one, the way that it goes up the wall, now the petiole length is a little bit long, but if you have a little bit of space from the wall, like if you have it on top of, like I do, like a cabinet or like a table or something like that, it's not really an issue because that's already taking up space, you know? And then it kind of like grows up the wall, and it's not really like cumbersome, like it doesn't get in the way or anything. And it looks really, really nice climbing up the wall that way. You can also do that with a lot of trailing type plants. Well, I say trailing type plants, but you can obviously, like I'm talking about growing them climbing, like pothos or like the philodendron micans or heartleaf philodendron, things like that, which are very accessible and easy to care for and can grow really quickly too. So if you want something that's going to take up kind of like some wall space and grow along the wall, those are some good options. However, so the self-heading philodendron, which if you're not sure what that is, it just means that they kind of like come up with shoots from the middle rather than climbing really more of like vertically. It's a little complicated because some will climb vertically somewhat, like my philodendron ring of fire. It's climbing. It is climbing, and it's more of a self-heading philodendron from what I understand. But there are some that have more of a compact growth pattern, which is like this philodendron radiatum. And this is the variegated version, but you can see how all the shoots are kind of sprouting from the same head. So it just like the new one comes out every single time from this one area, and it's not climbing really vertically. However, I do have this on a moss pole, and when you put them on a moss pole, it kind of directs all of the leaves forward. So instead of having this like very round plant, all of its growth is pushed in one direction. So you can kind of push this up against a wall, and the only space is essentially halving the space because you don't have this going in the opposite direction too. So this works really, really well. You can also, with some of these philodendron, even the climbing ones, you can hang them on wall mounts. And obviously when you do that, it doesn't take up much space, right? Because it's not on the floor. It's not really in the way. You can hang them, if you have really tall windows, you could hang them higher up so that they're not like within walking, like your walking area, so they don't impact you moving through your space or anything like that. And that really, really conserves space too. But yeah, this one's really gorgeous. Like, look at that new leaf. Wow. So beautiful. I'm so excited to see these like serrated edges starting to really stand out. So beautiful. But that's a really good option. And I have two. This is the philodendron nuclear. I think it's just the philodendron, like the green philodendron that has this kind of like neon Hoya type variegation. And this one is so cool because when it comes out, you can see in the middle, the leaves are like hot pink. And then the backs of the leaves where the variegation is this like neon hot pink. And it's kind of like the philodendron ring of fire kind of does that too, where it has that really like neon pink coloration to the new growth. But you can see I don't have this one on a moss pole, but I have it where all the light is coming from this direction. So it's kind of doing the same thing. So even if you didn't want to necessarily put it on a moss pole, you could still train it to do this where it's only going in one direction. So it doesn't have this on one side and then on the other side also. So we have half the space being used, but it looks really great and full from the front. And you do that just by having the light coming mainly from one direction. So all of its leaves are facing the front where the light is, and it has that same growth pattern where it's all going in one direction. Okay, next we're gonna be talking about another one of my recent obsessions, and that is Platycerium or Staghorn ferns. This, if you don't have a lot of space and you're looking for especially like greenery for aesthetic purposes, like you just want to liven things up a little bit and bring a little bit of interest, but you do not want anything that's going to be like super high maintenance or take up much space, Platycerium, Staghorn ferns are amazing for that. You can mount them on the wall, and look at how cool this looks from the front. Like that looks freaking amazing to have that hanging from your wall. And you can mount it like totally like overhead. Like I have mine over my doors, so I don't come in contact with this at all. I can't even reach it unless I'm on a chair. And it looks so good. Like how interesting is that to see on the wall? And it looks so good when you have a lot of these like grouped together and stuff. This is not mature. Like they can get huge. It is more difficult to get them to size up like as big as they would in the wild, in their natural habitat indoors. But with any plant, it is like pretty much any plant is manageable. You know, like you can always cut things back. You can always propagate and start over. There are always options to reduce the size of a plant if it's getting too large and out of control for you. But in my experience, Staghorn ferns, even when they start maturing like this one does, it's still not taking up that much space. Even if I had a lot of fronds going downwards and upwards, the fact that this is mounted to my wall, like it's totally out of the way. It's not causing me any issues at all. I take these down maybe once. I've been trying to do once a week because they've been drying out more, because it's still, I'm in Georgia in the south of the United States. So it's like still very hot during the days, even though it's like autumn. So they've been still drying out pretty quickly because it's very warm and they're above my door, which is where a lot of that hot air is coming through. But I mean, I've been able to go longer than that for sure. I've gone like a couple of weeks before on these larger ones and they've been totally fine. And I would imagine in the winter when, you know, things like aren't as hot and the plants aren't quite as thirsty, they could probably go 2 weeks or more. You just want to check on them every now and then. And when their sphagnum moss is dry, just give them a little rinse or submerge them. I did have someone say that they like to submerge theirs and that works really well for them. I just take mine to the sink and kind of like spray them down and let them sit for a little while, and that works well for me at this point. But submerging them may be a better idea. That may be something that I'll switch over to in the future. But yeah, so these are really cool. You can mount these, you can grow them in pots, there are a lot of different options. I did recently make a Staghorn fern mounting video where I showed you how I mount my Staghorn ferns because I got a couple of new ones, and I will link that in the description below if that is something that you are interested in. But yeah, this is a really great option. This is the Platycerium Netherlands. This is a really common one that you will see really frequently, like in Walmart, and I've seen these in Lowe's a tons of times. I've actually got this one I got from Home Depot, and then I have a really, really big one that I have in a hanging planter that is like in the same area as these, but that one is from Lowe's. And this is the cutest Staghorn fern you'll ever see in your entire life. This is one of the ones that I mounted in that last video that I got from the Green Escape. And let me tell y'all, I made a big oopsie with this. Like, these things are so resilient. I'm not used to having a Staghorn fern that is this small. Like, you can see the difference in the size of that moss ball between these two. And sphagnum moss dries out pretty quick, especially when it's hot. Like I said right now, like this one needs to be watered again, even though I just watered it a few days ago. So if you have these and you're mounting them and they are smaller, make sure you're really keeping an eye on them and watering them more frequently, especially when they're just kind of like getting established. Because I let this go, it was not even that long. It was like, I don't even think a full week without water. It was like 6 days. And it was, this thing, it looked like a little green potato chip. Like, it was like so crispy and shriveled up. And I don't know how, like, I just didn't, that's another thing with these. Like, you can literally just like mount them and forget about them and like just check on them once a week and see if they need to be watered. Because I was not paying attention to it at all. And when I went and I checked on it, I almost had a stroke because it was all shriveled up. It literally looked like a little green potato chip. Like, it was like all fried. And I watered it and you literally cannot even tell. Like, it totally unshriveled, came back, not a care in the world. It's doing fine. It's putting out You can't really see on the camera, but 2 little little nubs of new growth there in the center. Just phenomenal. I cannot believe if this was any other plant and it had like shriveled up that much, it would not come back from this. But this one totally just like unraveled itself and it's fine. So super resilient. Even if you do underwater them, they'll probably come back. But when they're smaller, check on them more frequently. When they're bigger, like my other one, I would just check on them once a week and make sure they're not too dried out. I have another one that I don't know what species it is, but it's really dramatic where if I don't water it for too long and it's starting to get thirsty, the fronds will start drooping down. So I know that it's time to water them. And that's kind of like, that was another mistake too. That's kind of like how I was judging when I needed to water them, because I was watching that one Staghorn fern and seeing if it looked kind of droopy yet. And then I would take them all down and water them. But when you have one that's so small, you've got to water it more frequently, especially like I said, when it's getting established. Like just don't let it dry out too much. Every few days, just give it a little check and make sure that it doesn't need to be watered. Okay, so I've got a couple of more categories that we're going to talk about. The next one is going to be succulents, cacti, euphorbia, kind of like those arid desert type plants. These are fantastic for if you want something that's very low maintenance. So they don't require obviously like a ton of water. They don't grow super quickly. They don't really need much. I've not had pests on mine. They just kind of like hang out and chill, and they're very like easy going plants that you don't have to worry about a lot. They also come in so many cool forms. So there are some that look just like totally crazy. There are some that get really big. They come in all kinds of different colors. They sun stress different colors. There are some when they bloom, they have like really crazy, interesting blooms. So there's a lot of, if you like really weird plants that are kind of like different and not so like jungly, just kind of something interesting to look at, but you don't want it to take up a lot of space. You don't want it to grow super fast. You don't want it to be super high maintenance. This is a great category for you. Now, granted, I am not the biggest like euphorbia, succulent, cacti person. That's just, it's not that I'm not interested in them. It's just, I literally cannot handle getting obsessed with another genus. Like I do not have space. I do not have space to fit any more plants in here right now, especially when there's like a genus that you've been ignoring for a little while. Like for example, me with Scindapsus, and it's like you ignore them and then all of a sudden you get this interest in them and you just go crazy and you like want to get, it's like when you first start collecting plants and you have this like frenzy to get every single species because every single one of them just looks like amazing and you just want to have it in your collection and look at it every day. And I do not have space, money, or energy to invest in becoming obsessed in an entire another genus right now. However, I do have a few. So I have a few that I got from my boyfriend, like the funny ones. There are some that look, there's one that's called a booby cactus, and that it's called that for a reason. And there are other ones that look like other parts of anatomy that is very funny just to have and watch grow, because it's just like they literally come in like the craziest types of like growth patterns and variegation and stuff like that. I do have a couple, however, so I have a couple that I take outside during the summer. I do not like grow those typically indoors. I have them upstairs right now in my kind of like, it's my neglect room. That's where I put all the plants that I'm like, I need to do something with them, or maybe they're not my favorite, or I just don't have room for them. And I stick them up there and it's kind of like, we'll see what happens. It's like my we'll see what happens space. And I put them up there during the winter and they're just like, I don't even know what they are. They're just some cacti and succulents that I got from like Lowe's. I think I got them from Lowe's this year. However, this is my Euphorbia. I cannot remember what this is. I'll put the name on the screen. But this one I love. This is like also called the African milk tree, I believe, and its growth just looks super cool. I will say this one's definitely the fastest growing out of the ones that I have. And when I got this one, it's effectively doubled in size since I've had it. Maybe actually a little bit more than doubled, because it was about half the size when I got it and it did not have any of these branches that it has now. And then I had ordered this, these like bigger ones. And then I went to Walmart and they had the same one and they had the little baby ones. So I bought the little baby ones and I planted them all together. And again, you can see like this whole top piece is new. It was to here when I got it. So it's grown quite a bit. I did put these outside in the summer this year. This one looks really cool. That one's got like a lot of variegation in that corner. But these are just like so interesting. They have this really cool pattern up the middle. And these also have like a variegated version that I really love. They have the white ghost, which is like a totally white version, which looks super duper cool. That may be a different, I'm not an expert. I'm not an expert on anything, but especially not Euphorbia and Cacti and like these genus of plants. But it looks similar to me. So if it's not the same species, it does look very similar. And then they have these cool little like leaves that they sprout out at the top. So it's just really interesting looking. It looks like very alien-esque to me. And it's just really cool. But again, it like doesn't, it's tall, but it doesn't take up that much space. Like it kind of like pushes itself inwards even as it grows. But it just looks really cool. I think these would look really good if you're like a minimalist and you want something that's just kind of brings a little bit of interest to the space, but it's not too much, you know, like I think this would be really great, especially if you want something that's not too crazy. A really popular one is the jade plants. I mean, you can find jade plants pretty much anywhere and they're really cool. And they're like the solid green version. I have the variegated version and it's also Crassula ovata. I just know it's the jade plant and this is the variegated jade plant. So again, there are lots of different like patterns and coloration and stuff with succulents and cacti, just like with any other plant. So if you're looking for a specific color scheme or you want something that has a little bit more interest, like this one has this really beautiful variegation. This one has a lot of variegation on it. I've seen some that don't have nearly as much variegation. And then also they sunstress this like pink color, which is just so cute. This one right here, like that one's turning pink around the edges. Maybe you can see that. But where did the other one go? Oh yeah, you can really see in that one. I got this at the same time as the other one that I just showed you, so a little over a year. And it's doubled in size too, but it's not that big. You know, like that's not taking up that much space. It's not. And it's super easy. I water these maybe like once every week and a half or more. And I have them in terracotta, so they'll like dry totally out in between waterings. And it's been so easygoing. If there's a color or pattern or texture that you like, you can find a cacti or succulent that is that. And then finally, we're gonna talk about my favorite genus, Anthurium. And there are a lot of Anthurium that get to be quite large. So this is something that, just like Philodendron, there are some that would work for you if you're trying to conserve space, and some that would probably not work for you if you're trying to conserve space, the ones that get really, really big. But as I said, with any plant, there are lots of options that you can take that will like reduce the size of the plant, or if you wanted to start the plant over and have like a smaller form of it, you can definitely do that. So always keep that in mind that those are options. So this is the first one that I'm going to talk about, and this is my Frigidii crossed with a Magnificum. And you can see this one is pretty big. Like this is a very large leafed Anthurium that's about the size of my head. And this already may be too much, right? Like this could be too large of a leaf size for you. However, when I think about conserving space, one thing that I like to think about is like, it's not necessarily always the size of the leaves, but the amount of leaves. So if you have like a ton of leaves that are really, really big, then it becomes like a lot. There's a lot going on when you have a million of these really big leaves. But for me, Anthurium are more on the slow growing side. And then they don't have a million leaves in there. So even though the leaves are kind of big, like there's not that many in here. There's only like, I have 3 leaves on this plant and it's putting out a 4th right now. But it's gorgeous. There are also a lot of Anthurium that have a more compact growth pattern. So their petioles are not quite as long and they're not as like sprawly with like quite as large leaves. This one is an Anthurium silver blush. And like, she is so cute. Like I said, Anthurium are my favorite genus, but like, I just think Anthurium leaves are just insanely gorgeous. Like the veination, how they stand, how like thick and leathery or velvety they are. Just absolutely gorgeous. And this one, like you can see those petioles are not super long. Like even though this is a more immature plant, the silver blush is one of the ones that just doesn't seem like, in most cases, its petioles are overly large and its leaves stay on the smaller side and kind of rounded. So it doesn't take up a ton of space, but it is still just so interesting and so beautiful. They don't grow overly quickly, but when they do, like you can kind of maneuver the leaves or cut things back or move them around to where they'll still fit wherever it is that you're trying to fit them in with not much hassle, you know. I will also say too, there are a lot of places, like I like to go on Etsy, like I mentioned on the Green Escape, or there are other sellers that you can find on Etsy and other places that sell for pretty reasonable prices, smaller seedlings of Anthurium, and those are very, very rewarding to grow out to, because in most cases you can see kind of like an example of what a mature plant would look like, or even in a lot of cases what the parent plants look like. So you know kind of what to expect in terms of traits, if there are specific traits that you are looking for. Like in a lot of cases, like a lot of people like myself really like the dark velvety leaves, or like the larger leaves or smaller leaves, or like I was saying, if you're trying to conserve space and you want something with smaller leaves, that's something that you can research beforehand and find some species that have a more compact growth pattern. And you can find some seedlings for really reasonable prices on places like Etsy and things like that. And those are so much fun to watch grow out, because they all look kind of the same when they're babies. Like they're just so tiny and cute. And then you get to watch them like mature and watch those traits really come out in the leaves. And it's just so much fun. And then lastly, I'm going to leave y'all just with a few tips on ways that you can consolidate space and make things fit better. So the first thing I'll mention is the use of grow lights. You do not have to be limited in your space by what your natural lighting is, how far something is from the window. Like you can just put a grow light there, and the majority of like the tropical plants that we like to grow in our homes will do fantastic in a really good, like a pretty strong grow light. So you can, if there's an area, kind of like a corner or something that you would like to put a plant in, but it gets no natural light, you could really easily just stick a grow light there, and you can put whatever plant you want to there and it'll do fine. Like there are tons of different grow lights that stick in the pot or clip onto something that you can mount on the wall. There are bulbs that you can put in to like lighting that you already have that will make that a grow light and provide the plant with what it needs. So you can, that is like a huge game changer. You can grow plants wherever you want to. Another thing that can really help is growing plants in hanging planters. So I have a window in my house where I have hanging planters kind of staggered, and you can fit so many plants in like that if you want to hang them like in front of a window, or even if you didn't want to put them in front of a window. Like you could easily install a curtain rod or something and put a couple of grow lights on it and hang some plants there, and that just frees up so much floor space because you don't have anything sitting on the floor. Like especially if you have it hanging on a curtain rod that's in a window, it's probably going to be above or at or above eye level, so it's not really impacting your floor space. So that is a really great option, and obviously it provides great light for the plants if you have it hanging in the window. I have got a jungle cactus hanging up. I've got a bunch of Hoya. I've got some Paulownia repens that look really nice, some cacti, some ficus, kind of like a trailing ficus, and they love obviously hanging in the window because of the natural lighting. Especially things like Hoya really like that intense natural light. So they can grow really well in the window and trail really nicely if you like that, like aesthetically. That'd be a great option for you. You can also do any, I mean, you could grow any plant hanging. If there's a plant that you want, but you don't need it like sitting in your floor, you could throw it in a hanging planter and just see what happens, especially if it's not like a super expensive plant or something like that. Also, if you have plants sitting like on a table or like kind of like a flat surface, it really helps to stagger planters, because when you have things on different levels, like I like to flip pots that I'm not using over, or like if I just have something sit around the house that could work for that, and kind of stagger my pots, because that way you could fit, instead of just like one row of plants in that area, you could put like 2 or 3 rows of plants depending on where things are. And then lastly, I mentioned this earlier, but wall mounts are amazing. Having any plant that can be mounted on the wall and out of the floor or off of the table or off of a space that you need to use for something else is amazing. And this is something that you can pair with the grow light. So if you have an area in your home or like a wall somewhere where you're like even thinking about putting art on or something like that, you could just put a wall mount over there and then put a grow light with it, and then bam, that's a great solution. So not only do they look great, but they're saving space, which is our desired outcome in this specific conversation. All right, y'all, that is going to be it for today. Thank you so much for stopping by and listening to me talk about this topic. I appreciate y'all so much. Please like, please subscribe if you want to see more content like this from me, and I will see you guys in the next one. Bye.